Hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to First Church of Religious Science in New York. Welcome to the people in the audience, as well as to all of you on Zoom. And welcome to those of you who will be watching today, tomorrow, and throughout the week on Facebook and YouTube. This evening's lesson, self-healing lesson, is entitled, Where Does It Come From? And this is a Louise Hay lesson. It was a part of a workshop. So what she's talking about is the things that come up. Why do we do the things we do? Where does it come from? And she starts out by saying, the past has no power over me. Okay, so you think about that. That seems to be a very positive affirmation. The past has no power over me, except the past has a lot of power over a lot of people because we carry within us a lot of beliefs and old ideas from the past, and they very much shape and color our perception. So I'm going to use Louise Hay's words here and there, and I'll add some comments. Louise said we've all gone through a lot of stuff in our lives, and we sifted through what we thought the problems were, and we've done the best we could with what we've been given. We did the best we could in every case, using our best thinking at the time. Here's the thing, okay, we've done the best. There's an expression from 12-step programs, the best of my thinking got me where it got me. So that suggests that we've made a lot of mistakes in the process of learning. I was told by a teacher years ago that we should think of life as being a great schoolhouse. And we'll make a lot of mistakes while we are learning. And as I often say, just because we've made mistakes doesn't mean that we are a mistake. We're here learning, okay? But tonight we're going to be looking at where does this stuff come from that holds us back? And let's identify some of it so we can let go of it, right? So here are some common situations or patterns of thought that people live with. A lot of people they fear failure, right? Or they live in fear and worry. And it's impossible really for them to take a risk because they fear everything. Sometimes in the classes we talk about the child character, nursery rhyme character, Chicken Little. So what was Chicken Little's cry? The sky is falling. So if you're living always, you're afraid of your own shadow, you're afraid to do anything because someone is going to do something. This is a pattern that's with you, and it would be holding you back. Another situation or pattern that people live with is procrastination. It's almost impossible for certain people to make a decision. They'll look to the right, they'll look to the left, they'll look to their mothers, their fathers, they'll pray to God, because they don't have the confidence to make a decision. That's a challenge. A person like that really won't initiate much change. They're just trying to keep things the way they are, and they're tortured with what do I do and what do I do? Another negative pattern, which we talk about all the time on Thursday nights, is the conversation that we have. So if you have what we call negative self-talk, and if you tend to be critical, self-critical, or critical of other people, if your inner dialogue is really about what's wrong and what's wrong with people and what's wrong with you, you're going to pay a huge price for that. And you don't have to do that. But see, here's the thing. If this is what you've learned as a child, this is, most likely you're being critical in lots of areas of your life. You're probably being critical of yourself, and you may be very critical of other people also. When I first encountered the book, You Can Heal Your Life, I was blown away by Louise talking about how people use the word should. Now, I use it from time to time. I used it once in this talk today, but I'm telling you, I'm very mindful of it. It's not a good word. Louise thought it was the most dangerous word in the English language. She said because wherever you're using the word should, you're basically putting other people down, or you're putting yourself down, or you're saying, I'm right and you're wrong, or they're wrong. You're making someone wrong. You're telling someone what they should do. It's always better to find words like could and say, hey, you might try it this way, or you could try it that way, and leave the decision up to the other person, and never, never, never criticize yourself. If you learn nothing more from this class on self-esteem and learning to love yourself, give yourself a break. Never, never criticize yourself for where you are, because no one on this planet, we're all spiritual beings. In that sense, we're all whole and complete and perfect. But none of us are yet living up to that entirely. We're moving in that direction. There's an old adage, we seek progress rather than perfection. There's no minister alive, there's no teacher I've ever had, no matter how great and wonderful, that would ever say that they got this down. We're all works in progress. And sometimes we feel really disappointed when we do really stupid stuff, and we think, God, I thought I learned that already. And when we're there, it's that old adage again, we remember and we forget. So if you plug into a class like this often, and you do your meditations, and you become mindful that you're one with this power, you're apt to stay on the beam longer. But if you're going out there flying solo and doing all the things that we do, we can forget. We can forget that we're supplied and supported, and we can get critical of others. We can become judgmental very quickly, and that sense of being connected. You lose that sense of being connected. So we try our best, people who are in this teaching, to stay connected. And I'm not talking necessarily about with one another, though that would be helpful. Staying connected with Source. So, that's waking up in the morning saying, good morning, universe, and knowing I'm one with it. And that universe you're looking for is not up in the sky somewhere, but that power and that presence is in you. And that's the thing you want to wake up to every day. And you want to wake up through the day and keep remembering, I am one with the one. So I'm going over some of the patterns that people, do and get themselves into that are holding them back. Some people dwell on the past a lot. I remember when I got to this center in 2017, everybody was all caught up in what it used to be like. And I'm going to tell you, that's a real problem when you're always caught up in what things used to be like. I mean, I have one of my sisters, she's always, we used to do this around Christmas, and we used to do that about Thanksgiving. I'm thinking, my God, it's 25 years later, and half these people are deceased. It's a different time, it's a different place. Maybe it's time to create some new rituals, new ways of getting together. Things will never be like they used to be. And so dwelling on that type of thinking and being remorseful about what isn't the same, I think it's craziness personally. But I mean, I have a lot of my own family members who do that. It's like they got this version of ain't it awful going on. And I had a great teacher, Dr. Bill, who used to say, if you keep on doing ain't it awful and poor me all over the place, he says, how is that ever going to lift you up? Because what we understand here is life responds to you. And if you keep on thinking what's wrong and it's changed and it's not the same, how can you ever see what's possible? And how can you ever see what's wonderful if you're all caught up in what's wrong and what's missing? So dwelling on the past, it's always a mistake. And letting go of resentments, letting go of regrets. Dr. Barker, our founder, said we are a today people. And he was colorful when he said it. We are a today people. We're not about what was going on here 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago. And any of you in your own life, you've learned a lot in the past 5, 10, 15 years. Because you're a spiritual being and you're evolving and you're growing. You're wiser now than you've ever been at any time in your life. So let's release the past. Let's let go of everything, right? That's been before. Be grateful for what we have learned. Be grateful for our parents that have taught us the things they've taught us and everyone that's come across our path. But we're not trying to go backwards, right? So we don't want to dwell on the past. And if you have any regrets, any of that type of like, poor me and, wish it were like, do yourself a favor and stop that, So we say here, stop in the name of love, just stop. Because we're learning to develop, what we call positive expectancy here. We're learning to live the affirmative life here, which means we're learning to see the good. We're learning to see the good in ourselves. We're learning to see the good in every person. That's our job. It's to do that namaste type of consciousness, like the divinity in me sees it and acknowledges it in you. Jimmy, that camera. This is our job, to keep seeing the good. Another thing, if you have a pattern where you're comparing yourself to others, that's something that's a trap too, because if I'm comparing myself to someone else who's like so successful and they got their act together in all kinds of ways, I'm going to wind up, having I'm going to think that I'm less than. And, if you're comparing yourself to someone who's showing up in life like they're not doing as well as you are, that's a trap also. So just stop comparing yourself to anybody. Next thing is, if you're a person that's what we call other referred, or you're seeking external validation and approval, that could be a problem. I learned about that probably, maybe 15 years ago. I was in a very good spiritual group. And the therapist, pointed out, if you're looking to your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your parents, or somebody else for approval, you're kind of abdicating your own role in life. Louise taught us that self-acceptance and self-approval in the now are the keys to all positive changes. So that's something we can do. You don't need to get permission from your mother, your father, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your teacher, or anything else. What we're really going for you here is to start to develop a sense of a love of yourself and a sense of an inner dialogue where you give yourself approval and you're not looking outside yourself for approval. Other things that we can watch for. Stop making assumptions. Stop making assumptions and jumping to conclusions. That ties into Don Miguel's Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements. And he says, refuse to be offended. People are going to do what they're going to do. And, it has nothing to do with you or me. Don't take everything personally. So common situations and patterns that people live with are, people avoid uncomfortable conversations and conflicts. They shut down when it would be better that we at least speak to how we feel. Other ways in which people cultivate some of these patterns is they allow toxic relationships. If you have a relationship that's really going badly for a long, long, long time, then it becomes more about you. Why are you staying in that relationship? Or if you're allowing yourself to stay in an environment that's really hurtful. So these are common situations that people endure. And they don't seek help when it's needed. Remember that making mistakes are natural. It's part of being human, and we should strive to learn from them. So as we make mistakes, it's a natural part of being human, and we should strive to learn from them and move forward with self-compassion and understanding. Feeling like you're not smart enough or educated enough to pursue your goals, or beating yourself up over past mistakes, especially if they've caused you harm. Feeling like it's too late to change course in your career, relationships, or your life in general. Or if you have an idea that you're too old, or you've allowed everyone, or you've alienated everyone to yourself. These are patterns and things that you can look. Being overly critical and harsh towards yourself, especially for things outside your control. Comparing yourself to others and feeling like you don't measure up. Do you have a tendency to ignore your own needs? And do you have a tendency to ignore your own dreams in order to please others? And that can lead to resentment and burnout. Do you allow anxiety to hold you back from pursuing new things? So any of these things are patterns, common patterns that people have and they do. Louise Hay said, as you think of all this, she says, then we can get to the underlying problem. And she said, it's plain and simple. She said, we feel we ourselves are not good enough. She said the bottom line for everybody that she's ever worked with is they really don't have enough self-love. They don't feel good enough as who they are. And then they start to, they're not happy and they project all this on other people. She said, from the way I look at life, if there's any problem, then wherever there's a problem, this has to be true. So let's look to ourselves and not to others. Let's look at where our beliefs came from, where they began to feel wrong or where we began to feel inadequate in any way. How did we go from being, she asked, a tiny baby who knows the perfection of itself and of life, to being a person who has problems and feels unworthy, shame, and unlovable to one degree or another? People who already love themselves can learn to love themselves even more, which is good news. And she asked us in this seminar to think of a rose from the time it's a tiny bud. They're very pretty. We've all seen them. And as it opens up to a full flower, right until the last petal falls, it's always beautiful. It's always perfect, and it's always changing. And she said it'd really be great if you could start to think of yourself like that, just as the rose from the little bud to the last petal, always perfect, always unfolding. And that's the way it is for all of us. We can think of ourselves this way. That's a good way, nice way of thinking. Always beautiful, always perfect, always evolving, always changing. And that's really the truth of you. And that is the truth of anyone. And it's the truth of anyone you resent, because everybody's evolving in light and in love. They're all evolving in consciousness. And so it is with us. We are always moving towards greater understanding, always beautiful, ever changing. We are doing the best we can with the understanding, the awareness, and the knowledge that we have. And as you gain more understanding, more self-awareness and knowledge, then you'll do things differently. You'll see a world differently. We will see the perfection in all. Then the next part is about mental housekeeping. Now's the time for us to examine our past a little bit more, to take a look at some of the beliefs that have been running us. Some people find this part of the cleansing process to be painful, but it doesn't have to be. In the 12-step programs, we talk about doing inventories every day, and when we're wrong, promptly admit it. So when we always want to be taking a look at what our conversation is like. Every Thursday I ask, well, what's it been like being you this week? Because that conversation you're having, if you're really downing yourself and you're miserable and you're thinking miserable thoughts, then you're creating a life that's obviously going to be unpleasant for yourself. So we want to do a mental house cleaning. Louise Hay said, you start wherever you you are with any thought you're thinking. And because every thought you think is contributing to your life experience. If I keep on thinking negatively all week long, then I can expect what's going to start shaping up in my life is going to be not too pleasant. If I can start working with my consciousness and loving myself and just stop in the name of love whenever I go there, wherever I start to complain or to blame anybody, or I want to see evil, speak evil, if I want to be part of the council of the wicked, wherever I do any of that type of stuff, unknowingly, I'm just going to set myself up for some pretty negative things that are come my way very soon. Louise said, what you put out there comes back to you. And some people will say, what you put out there comes back to you multiplied. And the thing is, when the negative comes back to you, it's not to hurt you either. It's there to be, as was told to me years ago, teacher to you. So if you're sowing a lot of seeds of doubt and fear and, you're blaming and you're full of grudges and all that, okay, no judgment here. You are where you are. But the thing is, that's going to bring you lessons. And when I was a student of this teaching years ago, we used to say, well, I'd rather get a little nudge from the universe than a cosmic 2x4. I'd rather get the lesson, the little ouch, rather than get the big ouch. So, in this teaching, we can learn how to approach life. We can learn how to approach the ocean of life, the ocean, as we say, with bigger buckets. We can have positive expectancy. We can learn to expect the best. We can learn to have a really great and wonderful vision. And, we'll be spared so much drama, so much pain, because when we have a lot of attachments, like it has to be this way, and these people have to be this way, then things get pretty rocky and there's a lot of pain. Ernest Holmes said, suffering is not God ordained. And Bill Wilson, during the same era, said, misery is optional. So if we find ourselves with a lot of angst and pain and suffering, the place we're going to find relief is within. We're going to find relief by waking up and realizing, okay, I have this power within me, and I can heal my life. And all I really need to do is get a handle on my thinking, my thoughts. Every thought I think is creating my future. All these patterns of negativity, where I hang on to them, are bringing forth, more of the same. So we do our work in consciousness. We do our work thought by thought. So as you think about cleaning a house, I'm back to Louise's work now. She'll say you can get rid of the old magazines, newspapers, dirty paper plates, laundry, and drop things in the appropriate places, waste baskets and everywhere else. And she said there's no need to get angry in order to clean a room. It's the same thing when we're cleaning our mental house. There's no need to get angry just because some of these beliefs that you've had are ready to be tossed out. Let them go as easily as you would you're scraping up food, from a plate into the trash after a meal. And she said, would you really like to dig into yesterday's garbage to make tonight's meal? And she said, so why would you want to dig into your old mental garbage to create tomorrow experiences? If a thought or a belief doesn't serve you anymore, let it go. Many of these ideas that we've had, might have served us when we were young children, but they don't serve us anymore. There's no reason to be afraid of any group of people. There's no reason to think anymore that money doesn't grow on trees. There's no reason to believe in scarcity. There's no reason to believe in a lot of things. Because you are supplied and supported. You are protected. The universe has your back. You are a created being with limitless potential. And these are the types of messages that you want to, keep bathing your consciousness with. So Louise studied, by the way, at our center in New York, and she studied the science of mind. And for those of you who do not know, the science of mind philosophy emphasizes that it's our thoughts and beliefs that shape our reality and experiences. Therefore, in order to create positive change in our lives and in any way help the world, we must first start with changing our own thinking. The spiritual journey that we take here is always an inner one. It's a personal one. We practice knowing that there's a power and a presence, and it's in us always. And we know that attempting to change people or circumstances outside of ourselves will lead to frustration, disappointment. People do not change because we want them to change. Remember, people are where they are by virtue and right of their own consciousness. And they're learning exactly what they need to learn. The right information will come to them at the right time when they're ready to grow. This is not anything we can force. So for any of us who are still trying to help our boyfriends, girlfriends, significant others, children, they are their own people. Whatever power it is that is sustaining you and keeping you going is sustaining everyone else as well. One of my favorite lines, which I put into this seminar of Louise's, is, "In truth, there is nothing outside of you." And this suggests that the world we experience is always a reflection of our own inner world. The world we experience is a reflection of our thoughts, our beliefs, our perceptions. We can't change the outer world without first changing ourselves from within. Our thought creates our reality. And so by changing our thoughts, we can change our experiences. This is why the work of transformation has to be with us, begin with us. When we focus on monitoring our thoughts, noticing where we are critical, noticing where we are judgmental, and when we work to say no to our judgments, we work to say no to our critical nature, and then we start to examine, what serves us. That's when we start doing the healing work, when we're monitoring our own thoughts and what comes out of our own mouths. Most people do it the other way, by the way. Most people in the world, not those of you who are with us, but most people in the world are focused on what's wrong with the world, what's wrong with everybody, what needs to be improved. See, they're kind of like the biblical idea of, they can see what's wrong in the other person, but they can't get, the log that's out of their own eyes. So we really do our work in consciousness, and we do the work with ourselves. So most people do it the other way. They're focused on what's wrong with other people, what's missing, they think, and what's not right, and what could be done, and they make lots of judgments about people, and they really don't know what's in the other person's heart, mind, or experience. Louise Hay taught this is not affirmative living that Holmes suggested that is our goal. As we do our work in mind, we do our inner work. And as we do that, our inner work, and we take charge of that conversation, we take responsibility for our own experience. As we do that, we become empowered to create the life we desire. We are not victims of the world either. We're not victims of the world we see in any way. And just the opposite, we are creators of our own reality. As we begin to understand we have this power and we learn to use it, you have great power available if you learn to use it. A lot of people use it destructively, because if you keep on thinking poorly of yourself and poorly of the world, you just walk into that reality, and that's too bad, because what you put out comes back to you. So, here and now tonight, I'm hoping everybody starts to stand up and think, I'm worthwhile, I'm loving, I'm lovable, I have everything I need. The universe is giving me all green lights to step up, step forward, and have great dreams and move into great experiences. And nothing and no one is against me. I wish some of you who would embrace that more and more. Because as you realize that you are caused your own experience, that's an old science of mind phrase, if you say, I am cause to my own experience, it doesn't suggest you're to blame for your experience. It just suggests that, you are the thing that initiates everything. So Raymond Charles Barker would have said years ago, you are the whole bit. So don't look to other people to approve of you. We're going for self-acceptance and self-approval here, and just start having a much higher vision, a greater vision, a powerful vision for your life and your reality. And as you do, everything's going to change, and there will be a quickening, and it will happen sooner than you think. By focusing on your own spiritual growth and development, we naturally become a positive force in the world, and we will uplift many around us much more because we're living it, right? It isn't about what we're telling people to do. It's because of our very presence and the way we live, and we're contributing to the greater good. Remember always, our power lies within us, and it's amazing. It's great to wake up and realize you are one with this one power, and you have this power that's unlimited to use to create the kind of life that you want. There's no need to look outside of yourself for solutions or trying to change other people. What we do in consciousness. I was told by a teacher years ago, it's not so much about what we need to do, it's about what we need to realize. So once we come to realize who we are, you're one with the universe, one with God, one with Source. Once you realize that, that's quite a thing. That's been called the best kept secret of the ages. That's spirit in you, God in you. It's always with you, and it's always responding to you. So we do our work there in consciousness. We focus on loving ourselves and our personal growth and transformation, which ultimately leads us to a happier and a much more fulfilling life. By changing our own consciousness and cultivating a really positive mindset and a loving mindset, we will attract every kind of positive experience, and we will influence others in more subtle and effective ways. Additionally, our teaching, the Science of Mind philosophy, recognizes the interconnectedness of all things and the power of collective consciousness. So the more like-minded people are doing this, we will lift up humanity. By doing our own inner work, we contribute to the collective consciousness, which creates, it goes out into the world. I can give you a few examples of limiting beliefs from Louise's seminar. If you have this limiting belief of I'm not good enough, you might know, most likely, I always know these things come from my childhood. So where does that come from? Could be your father and mother told you something, or you might have been ridiculed in some way, or told you weren't good enough. Someone was doing some fault finding, and you accepted it. And then, you find yourself a teenager and an adult, and there you are, you become like your father, whoever it was that taught you this way. What's behind that, Louise said, is a lack of self-love. Okay, so we know ground zero is pretty much the stuff that we learned as we were young children, and that was reinforced. It doesn't even matter so much anymore to me where it came from. It's more like, okay, I want to release the need for this, and I want to replace it. Some people want to spend a lot of time trying to figure out where it came from. That's not my particular need. But my preoccupation is wherever anything like that pops up is to neutralize it, release it, and replace it. If you're a person who's trying to win people's approval, and I think I did that at one point earlier in my life, it's kind of like, we're very much other referred. You're wanting someone to say you're a good boy, good girl, all that. What Louise Hay is wanting us to move towards or suggesting is, again, self-acceptance and self-approval is really the goal. It's where you want to wind up. If you're really good with yourself, you shouldn't be worried too much about what other people are thinking. That was a gift from Terry Cole Whitaker when she wrote the book. I think the title was "What You Think of Me Is None of My Business." When you're really loving yourself and you're doing the right thing and you're focused on the good and the God in your life and you're developing positive expectancy and you're learning to live the affirmative life, then you're not really it isn't your business to be, it's not that you don't care about people, it's just the opposite, but you're not trying to look for people to say you're okay. And then the underlying, I'm skipping a lot of this stuff, the underlying belief that Louise comes up with everything here in all this list is a lack of self-love. If you lived in a family where there's a lot of fear, where everything was grim and harsh, where you couldn't express yourself as a child, then it shows up as an adult, and once again, where you don't feel good enough. So where it came from is not feeling good enough. Another childhood case that she had as a young girl was ignored as a child quite a bit, and difficult to find a voice, and always silent, and wound up, doing drugs and alcohol, and then a lot of things happened. But the child lost their voice, lost their sense of self-esteem. So this person had to wake up and find their voice and learn to love themselves. There's an exercise here about parental messages. I don't really want to go through all of it with you. Jimmy gave me a lot of material today that, it's basically, I can say it differently. What was it like as a child? What did your parents say about money? Were you taught that there wasn't enough? What did your parents tell you about yourself? Did they say you were beautiful? Did they say you were wonderful? Did they comment about your physical appearance? Did they say, oh, you're handsome, you're beautiful? Or did you get criticized even as a very young child? You're not as attractive as your sister, your brother, you're too thin or you're fat or anything like that. How did your parents act towards them, towards one another? Or if they weren't married, how did your mother act towards her boyfriends or, her father? What was modeled in your family? Did you see a lot of love in relationships? Because we have a tendency to be drawn towards, similar things as we get older. What did your family say about your creative talents and abilities? I was always told I could do everything and anything I wanted. So I got a lot of good stuff, but quite honestly, I got a mixed bag, and I'm pretty sure that's probably true for a lot of us. Did you get any limiting or negative things from your family? Just bring that to mind if you did. Louise would ask, where did those beliefs come from? And she would ask you to jot down these things. She would ask you to jot down positive and negative messages that you got, just so you could be aware of them. Did you get messages from authority figures? Or did you learn something about authority figures that's not true from your family? What messages did you get from your church if you went to church? That's usually a hot subject for many people. I remember learning by the time I was 6, for example, that I was a sinner, and I was told that there's mortal sins and venial sins, and you could go to it was hell for a long, long time. I learned that I was born in original sin, so that's a lot of stuff that I learned by the time I was 6 years old. And the reason Louise is asking us what messages you got in all these areas, because usually ground zero is your childhood. And as you think about all these things, what comes to mind? All of this stuff is the very beliefs that make you today feel not good enough, if you're hanging on to any of that stuff. Louise Hay had many exercises. You can go to her book, You Can Heal Your Life, where she asks you to see your inner self as a child. And in that process, she's suggesting you give that child lots of love and stop yelling at that child. I won't do the exercise here today, but I will say stop yelling at yourself. Stop criticizing yourself. Never, never, never criticize yourself. But it's worthwhile if you have a lot of those unresolved issues to go into the book and to go through that exercise. Let's see. So I think at this point I want to turn the lesson over to you, and you can talk about, if you want, what kind of messaging you had as a child and what you've done to correct it. Now, in some cases, you're going to say the messaging was terrific, because I have some of that too. But I also had a lot of the other kind, and which would invoke shame and blame and critical thinking and all the rest. So Louise said, what you put out comes back. And we teach here the law of mind. The tendency of your thought comes back to you. Every Thursday I will ask, what's it been like being you? Because that inner dialogue you have is far more creative than anything you know. So as you can begin to shift your thinking and your dialogue to something far more positive, your life is going to mirror that positive conversation. So now we're going to turn it over to you.